So, Jason Kelly, I'm a Muddy Wamba man, and I'm also one of the members of the AAG that sits out at Mungo, or councillor for my father who sits at the table at Mungo. But I've been involved with Mungo pretty much all of my life, and used to be attending in a lot of the meetings going back into the 80s, into the 90s, even up till present. So one of the visions that's always sort of been there, and one of the visions that comes to my mind really, that Nana pushed for, my grandmother Alice Kelly, one of the pioneering elders out there at Mungo, was the vision for an education centre and a culture centre. And that was sort of one thing that came out in the 90s and was pursued, and was even approved by the Aboriginal, what then known as the Free Traditional Tribal Groups and the Elders Councils, and it was being pursued right up to the point where we had an architect, we had plans designed, it was all approved, we had government approval for it. But then it all fell apart because once the government or parks or the bureaucrats at that time decided it was a good idea and were willing to fund it, the barrier then became how this was going to be maintained. And so it all just sort of fell away. There was no support with us, the Aboriginal people, and our aspirations, and in accordance with self-determination and our vision, because we always had the intention of one day we're going to own this place, one day we're going to be supported to take over, have the management, of it. We had these aspirations that were there, that were in line with UNDRIP before UNDRIP sort of came about, and Nan and the old people out there at that time also were talking UNDRIP before UNDRIP came about, because they talked about the importance of all the bureaucrats out there to go back into the town and talk to the Aboriginal communities also, and ask what their intentions, what they wanted out of Mungo, and the return of Mungo man and Mungo lady. One of the things that was always there though was the fact that they were adamant they wanted Mungo man and Mungo lady returned and then reburied, but the things that sort of came out of that was still the education centre and all that other stuff. And Nan herself, when we sit there out at the table, because of the bureaucratic processes, we hit a lot of barriers. We were always constantly hit with hurdles and roadblocks. And so, in a way, all decision-making processes, we set on something and it takes a long time, like the education centre, research centre, keep in place, all these things that they entitled it, but was always adamant that it was going to be an education centre. The vision was always there for us and our aspirations, but we always had the roadblocks, and we were sort of like always talked out of in a way. Now we're getting to the point where everyone's just going, you know what, let's just rebury the bones. But I want to talk a bit about the vision that was presented since I've been there in the last 3 years, because what really surprised me or shocked me was that the fact that when I came there in 2018, I actually was on the agenda. I wasn't on there, but I came there and had an architect who had another planning thing, because it was time to revisit, all of those previous aspirations, and it centered around the education centre and to keep in place. And so I had a young architect who brought up a design concept, and I presented to the AAG as an in-camera session. And once we did that, the AAG all agreed that this was a fantastic idea and let's revisit it. And the directions was for me to go and pursue it. A few months later, that's when I officially came on. When Arnie took his term, had finished, and Dad had come on, and I came on as his councillor. Then we started looking at again. So through the AAG, we brought it up, and there was a resolution provided that that the AAG and myself was to write a letter to Susan Lay, the Minister, and it went to Ken White also. And it was around the vision of an international education centre, one that tells a story for all Australians. And I highlighted in that letter, we highlighted what we call the significant imbalances between Aboriginal rights and obligations and non-Aboriginal rights and obligations when it comes to our visions and our supports with culture and culture management. And I highlighted the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been recently spent on the upgrade of the National War Memorial, noting the importance of the Anzacs and the story that they have to tell for all of Australians, but also how Mungo has the same importance for us, and it's relevant for all Australians. And also highlighting like the $100 million that was assigned and allocated to the John Monash Interpretive Centre over there in France at Villers-Bretonneux, and the money that's spent there on that side of the history, and the various other means, and also the $50 million that was just been at that time recently allocated for the redevelopment of Botany Bay, and $3 million alone for a statue of Captain Cook. But here we was going back from the 90s right up for now with the vision of the education centre, culture centre, and also talks about memorials for Mungo Man and Mungo Lady, because the only thing that had been agreed upon was that Mungo Man and Mungo Lady were to go back into the ground. So as part of that vision in that letter to the ministers, as that was passed as an AAG resolution, was around that vision around putting Mungo Man and Mungo Lady back into the ground, but also to have with memorials, and to allow for a safe space that was defined by us as to where we could people could actually come as a place of pilgrimage to actually respectfully pay their respects to Mungo Man and Mungo Lady, not just for all Aboriginal people around Australia, but also all the people, particularly Indigenous peoples around the world, with the free TGs having the responsibilities for caring and protecting that site. So, having said that, when it was passed as a resolution for the AAG, for a role to me to do on behalf of the AAG, we sent it. It had to go back to the idea was for the Relandra Lakes region, World Heritage Area Committee, full committee. So that's made up of the members of the AAG, it's got local government, it's got the scientists, it's got local tourism, and whoever else. It might be about 18 members of that. So then the purpose of that was then for us to write the letter on behalf of ourselves and then have support through that committee. When that was done and written, put up in a way, then the barrier came again from through the bureaucracy and the processes out there. Even when highlighting UNESCO and UNDRIP policy around where our rights and obligations are, we was informed by I'm not going to name the people, but I'm going to name the title, and this was for the executive officer and the team leader for Partnerships and Planning World Heritage Branch. So I'm gonna, because I want to be sure I get the wording right. And then I'm informed that the AAG is appointed by New South Wales Parks and Wildlife to provide advice to National Parks and Wildlife Service on Aboriginal cultural heritage matters within the Relandra Lakes region and World Heritage property, so including Mungo National Park. And then, in their words, as such, we're not appointed to provide advice direct to the state Commonwealth ministers, and this is therefore outside of our our terms of reference, or outside of what they see us being able to do. And this is saying, and then I was saying this is why that now we're being directed that if we're going to draft that letter, to remove the title AAG from that title and just send it as traditional owners. So just to get around that bureaucracy, I ended up doing that, but I sought advice and approval with the letter with members from each of the tribes. I got email responses from the members. I got enough to get a consensus, probably 80% with the things. I got phone calls back, but I sent it to elders like also Uncle Roy Kennedy, an IAMPA elder that had been out at the table for a long time. And he was really excited about it and could see maybe this is something for change. Maybe we might see the aspirations, because not only was there the vision that was really well supported, but there was also Now we're using an important international policy document. And so I want to also make the point that, you know, if UNESCO, if Mungo is a World Heritage Site, and UNESCO are defining the sites, and then if UNESCO policy on engaging with Indigenous peoples guides UNESCO and our work in all areas of its mandate, and it's supposed to ensure that policies, planning, programming and implementation uphold UNDRIP, then we're not having that experience, because another major thing that's coming out of there, the Aboriginal Advisory Group, we're not resourced. So we sit at that table and we provide that thing back, and we get all these barriers, but we don't have any resource, we don't have no budgeting, no funding, no support to go out and consult with all of the other our tribal committee and our tribal community members that to allow for them, so that everything's guided, everyone's informed, and everyone's got that free, informed prior consent, which is really the big number one when you're talking about UNDRIP. That's the big number one main thing. That's a really important policy area, and that's something that Nan and even all our elders before, there's there in the previous minutes going back to the 70s, 80s, always clearly articulating that about informing and all our tribal community members and informing them, and also just hearing from them also about what their aspirations are and what the vision is. So it's just this constant bureaucratic, it's just I don't know whether whether it's intended or not, but for me and from my experience, it's amounting to oppressive conduct. And so now everyone just wants to get Mungo man, Mungo lady into the ground. We only had a meeting as recently as 18 months ago, just before before COVID, where once again we're talking about it, and I used the opportunity AAG to explain to everyone about, okay, we're going to put him in the ground, we know that, but how about this? And I grabbed the text and I went to the whiteboard and I just did like a big donut. So just imagine this is our education centre, and in the centre is like a donut, but there's no, but it's an outside part within the building. What if we put Mungo man and Mungo lady back in the ground and that in there? Or what if we have the education centre and whatever else it's going to be, and we put Mungo man and Mungo lady back in the ground, and then we've got the memorials for them. People can come. We have the education centre. There's a part at the back. It's like a balcony, and you can go there and stand at the back, and you can look at back at the education centre, and you can see Mungo man and Mungo lady down there resting in line of sight at whatever appropriate a distance that the elders define, that allows for these really important people, that enables Mungo to be the place of pilgrimage that we always talk about. Because also we always talk about our old people as being really clever, and everyone talks about Mungo man and Mungo lady being so clever that they saved themselves for 40,000 years and then presented themselves to the world at the time that we needed. So they gifted themselves to us. If they showed themselves to us, they gifted themselves to us. If we truly believe how, and I do, how clever our old people are, that they actually presented themselves to us at the time that we needed them. And they're, who are we to go and then just go and put them back and make them anonymous and not know where they are? They deserve to be respected, they deserve to be cared for, and they deserve to be under the eyes and the protection of us, but allows for them to Mungo to be a place of pilgrim where people are coming to pay their respects. Because one thing that's also, because of the bureaucratic processes, it doesn't allow for, what I don't think that we really have considered, when we're looking at our Indigenous brothers around the world, particularly over there on Turtle Island, they think 7 generations ahead. We need to start thinking what's 7 generations ahead going to look like at Mungo? Nan was adamant right back in the early days that the one fear, even though we wanted them back in the ground, the one fear that she was adamant that she didn't want was them to be put just back out there in secret. Because her big fear was that they would fall into, in her words, restless hands. We don't know what roads are going to go through there in 100 years' time, or 50 years' time, or 200 years' time. We don't know what's going to happen out there environmental-wise. She wanted to make sure that they are in one place and protected.
So Jason, this Willandra Lake's Aboriginal Ancestors Reburial Project 2021, which is co-authored by New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife and Premier and Cabinet. Is the proposed activity is to put all the human remains back in secret at an anonymous, undisclosed location. No memorials, no keeping place, no centre, nothing, just back secretly into the ground. And this document claims that the proposed activity will fulfil the long-term aspirations of the 3 traditional tribal groups of the Willandra Lakes World Heritage Area. What's your response to that?
I've had a briefing of that document. Knowing what I know, even reflecting on what I participated in, and even my experience just recently, and having access to previous minutes, that document is factually incorrect. So I challenge, that is not a valid document. It doesn't take into account all the emotion was marked. So about 18 months ago, we drafted a motion, or the Muddy descendants, or that part of the AAG. We drafted 2 resolutions that was put through the full Willandra committee. One was for an independent report into all of the past minutes and all of the past meetings, to deliver a report on the Aboriginal voice, because what we identified is that there were so many things that were decided and actions, that came out as meetings from the elders, that then wasn't followed up as actions. And the education centre, research keeping place, they were all part of it. Even to the point where the government committed to it, and it was a design and planning done for it. It was accepted, and then it fell away because we didn't have a business plan. Essentially, it fell away because we didn't have a business plan of how it was going to be maintained. But the budget was allocated to build the place. The design, it was all done. All those decision processes were done. They were not. So it's not there. It's not because of us. It's because of the bureaucracy that hasn't supported us. Now this report's being done, and in the absence of the independent report that came out of an action 18 months ago, which would really point out, that report is false. The other action was for, I know we're coming up to 40 years, but there was another motion put forward for the whole Willandra committee, that 18 people committee, or whatever it was, with the scientists and everyone. We had a seat. We have one of the 3 tribes at the table, so there's 17 other people, whatever it is, at the table. And it was a resolution put up. It was in accordance. It was sent to the independent chair along with the resolution for the independent report. I understand the independent report got passed as a resolution. Yet to see the actions from it, because it's certainly missing out of this report. The other resolution was to enact a 30-year plan that would deliver on self-determination. Didn't talk about the culture centre or all that, because the culture centre would have been the first report after that. And it mentioned UNDRIP, it mentioned UNESCO, and it mentioned the high aspirations for that, and how Mungo is a UNESCO park. We should be informed by that policy, and that should be, so how do we deliver on the aspirations? So we asked for a resolution to deliver on Aboriginal self-determination with realistic, achievable goals, from marking from 1 year to 5 years, and then to the 3 years. They can lead sequentially to that long-term success that will enable us to have the ownership, that allows for the handover, that builds our capacity to run the place as we see fit. Because we envisioned the education centre and the monuments for Mungo Man and Mungo Lady. We're having control about who, how they're secured, how they're looked after, how it enables the monuments and their resting ground is a place for people to be able to come in a safe, respectful way that secures them, because they're under the within line of sight. We had the culture centre. We'll talk about the culture centre, the education centre being a truth-telling centre also. Talking about this is how Mungo Man and Mungo Lady lived for 60,000 years. This is how the rest of the Aboriginal people live for 60,000 years. With Australia being a continent rather than an island of 350 different languages, 400 different nations, and had centres that specifically focus on Muddy, Barkindji, Nyampa. All of those were all part of the vision. But we always, the bureaucracy, it was always been, the just the hurdle or the wall that always stopped us. So if we can't achieve our aspirations or be supported in our vision, at Mungo, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and UNESCO policy engaging Indigenous peoples, we're not experiencing that. We're pointing it out and trying to figure out, but we're constantly being hobbled by state and Commonwealth bureaucracies because they're funding their funding restrictions or whatever it might be. The language in the past was because parks and wildlife, we can't maintain such a thing, or we can't, it's about supporting us to be self-determined. We're looking for not just a place for all Australians and Indigenous brothers and people from the world to be that place of love, peace and harmony that Nana talks about, centering with Mungo man and Mungo lady, resting there in peace, but being a point of world pilgrimage. They're to bring the thing for us. Like, that's where our aspirations are. They're always need to be able to be able to rest in peace, but also be able to be, provided that to be the draw card in a way.
And Jason, last year in 2020, for the United Nations World Interfaith Harmony Week and an event sponsored by the municipality of Haifa in Israel, you gave a speech which presented your own cultural perspective that Mungo man was on a level for you and your Aboriginal people, just like a prophet Abraham or the prophet Moses, and that he was representing something like that as a prophet for you and Mudthi and others. So what would it say about the respect for this ancestor and Mungo lady as well, for them to be put back anonymously, secretly in the ground where nobody knows where they are? Is that an honourable way to treat someone that you consider to be a prophet?
No, absolutely. If that's what they wanted for us to do, to do that, they would not have presented themselves to the world for us. They gifted themselves to us, and they gifted themselves to the world. Yes, we want them. Like I said, the only thing that we have decided on is that yes, they must go back into the ground, but that there's no need to go put them out in secret. What does that mean if we're thinking 7 generations ahead? If we're trying to, how the world's constantly shifting, what's it mean for our aspirations and the future generations if we put them in secret and we're denying everyone the right to come and pay respects to someone who we all descend from? They presented themselves to help us, not to be, but like I said, we're coming up to 40 years, and we've had 2006 since UNDRIP. I can't remember what year it actually was when UNESCO policy engaging Indigenous peoples came out, but it's done nothing for us. And when we've highlighted that, because that's been the difference, how our aspirations and how we should be supported, it's done nothing. Because we're being told that we're not appointed to provide advice direct to the state or the Commonwealth. If we're not sitting inside their budget constraints and we're not allocated a budget to go and consult to allow for that free-forming prior consent to ensure all our tribal community from the free tribes are able to actively participate in setting policies. We're not even enable them to actively participate in making decisions, because at the end of the day, when we're not able to do that, and the same people at the table there are being told, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that, no, you can't do that, no, you can't. Then you get to where we are now. No, just get them in the ground then.
Well, this same document, Jace, from the New South Wales government, says the Australian government endorsed UNDRIP declaration in 2009. It also goes on to say that the proposed activity, which is a secret reburial of these ancestral remains, is consistent with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People.
Well, I've got it in writing from the executive office and the team leader from Partnerships and Planning and Heritage Branch that we don't have that right, because they're saying we're not appointed. They're saying that we're appointed by them. So they're saying that we're appointed by Parks and Wildlife, and that we're not to provide advice direct to the state or the Commonwealth. Now, when you look at the all the parts within UNDRIP, of course we'll go through them and work with them first. But if we hit barriers because of their budget constraints or what is or not within their remit, for example, to build a business case, then we need to be provided the opportunity to go speak directly as the AAG. But we're told if we want to do that, we've got to remove that title of AAG, which is Aboriginal Advisory Group. And that itself, we used to be the Free Traditional Tribal Group. They've even changed our name to the Aboriginal Advisory Group. That weakens the name. That even weakens itself because now we're not free traditional owners. We're just Aboriginal advisors.
Mm-hmm. So, just in closing, Jason, you're advocating for, at the very least, at the first step, a memorial, and then that can be built around in future time to come into a cultural centre and education centre and other things.
If we can, no one argues that they've got to go back into the ground. And if they're in such, what I would love then is for a commitment from the government or whoever it is that okay, let's put them in the ground, let's build the monuments, let's fence it off.
Yeah.
Let's fence it off, and let's get a commitment to build the education centre that can have the decking at the back, or we can have a viewing platform at a designated area like they'd have at Red Top out there, or when you're going out to the walls of China. You can get up to, here's your cut-off point, don't go past there, but now you can see.
Yeah. Anything else to say, Jace?
You know what, we always talk about, the only thing I want to see is that if this is a World Heritage Park under UNESCO and UNESCO policy, and they really talk about UNDRIP, I would like to have that experience. I would like to experience the high expectations that we have for ourselves being supported through parks, through the Office of Environment and Heritage. But when we've got bureaucratic people telling us what we can't do, it's got to stop.
Well, just finally, I mean, the same paragraph in this document, which says and states that the proposed activity of secret reburial is consistent with UNDRIP, goes on to explain that UNDRIP confirms the application of existing human rights instruments to Indigenous peoples, including freedom from discrimination and the right to self-determination and to pursue their cultural development.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if they got that report, that independent report that was already passed as a resolution probably well over a year ago, then that report would look a lot different because that hasn't been informed by none of it. That's just fit of a narrative of someone who wants it to fit that. That's a bureaucratic document fitting a bureaucratic narrative. It's not highlighting, it's not talking about none of the things that we identified and approved previously.